The galaxy had known peace for 2,000 years. 47 different alien species lived together under one set of rules, managed by something called the Galactic Concordat. These rules kept everyone safe. The most important rule was simple: never attack another species' military ships without warning. Break that rule, and face the combined anger of 46 other civilizations. Commander Thalson sat in her office on Concordat Station, reviewing reports as she did every morning. She was Vryn, a species known for their careful thinking and excellent memory. Her skin was pale blue and her 4 eyes could read multiple screens at once. For 15 years, she had worked as a military analyst, studying how different species fought wars. It was usually boring work. Most species followed the same patterns, used the same tactics. Except the humans. Thalson pulled up her file on humanity. They had joined the Concordat 73 years ago, still newcomers by galactic standards. Some species had been traveling between stars for 10,000 years. Humans barely had 100 years of faster-than-light travel under their belts. Their fleet was small, only 300 ships. Not impressive compared to the Corvox Dominion's 2,000 vessels, or the Shadari Collective's 1,500 warships. Human technology was average. Their weapons were decent, but not special. Their shields were standard Concordat-grade equipment that anyone could buy, but something about human ships bothered Thalson. She had studied the designs carefully. Every system had a backup. Every backup had another backup. Human vessels carried more spare parts than any other species. Their training manuals included scenarios that seemed impossible. What happens if you lose main power, backup power, and your bridge crew at the same time? Most species would say that ship was finished. Humans had a procedure for it. She made notes in her report. Humans designed for worst-case scenarios that other species considered too unlikely to bother planning for. Her communicator buzzed. It was her supervisor, Director Meltas. Thalson, we have a situation developing in the Deneb sector. Report to Conference Room 7 immediately. She arrived to find 12 other analysts already watching a holographic display. It showed the Deneb sector, a region of space where 5 different species had overlapping trade routes. Lately, there had been tension between humans and the Corvox Dominion. The Corvox were a proud species. They had powerful military forces and controlled significant territory. They looked almost like Earth's dinosaurs, with scaled skin and sharp teeth, standing 8 feet tall. For months, they had complained that human merchant ships were taking too much business in the Deneb trade corridor. The Concordat mediation failed, Director Meltas explained. His species looked like walking trees, and he spoke slowly. The Corvox rejected the compromise. They claim humans are deliberately undercutting their shipping prices. Are they? Another analyst asked. Human merchant vessels are simply more efficient, Meltas replied. They use less crew and more automation. Their prices are lower because their costs are lower. It's fair competition. Thalson watched the display with growing concern. She saw Corvox military ships gathering near the trade corridor. Too many ships for a routine patrol. Sir, this looks like... The display suddenly lit up with alerts. Red emergency signals flooded the screen. Someone gasped. 3 human cargo vessels had just been destroyed. Their escort ships, 2 frigates, tried to fight back but were overwhelmed. Within minutes, all 5 human vessels were gone. Dead. 847 people had been aboard those ships. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what they were seeing. This was a violation of the non-aggression mandate. The most sacred rule in the Concordat had just been broken. By the stars, Meltas whispered. What have they done? Thalson pulled up the tactical data. The attack had been coordinated. 12 Corvox warships had ambushed the human convoy without warning, without declaration of hostilities, without even a demand to surrender first. They had just opened fire. Worse, the Corvox weren't even hiding what they had done. Admiral Jathok, the Corvox officer who ordered the attack, was broadcasting a message across all Concordat channels. His image appeared on the display. He was a massive Corvox covered in dark red scales with rows of sharp teeth visible when he spoke. Let this be a lesson. Admiral Jathok declared. The Corvox Dominion will not be displaced by upstart newcomers. Humans must learn their place in the galactic order. We have shown them the consequences of their economic aggression. Thalson felt sick. This wasn't just a violation of rules. This was murder. Those cargo ships had been carrying civilians, families. The escort frigates were military, but they never had a chance against 12 warships. The Concordat Council called an emergency session within the hour. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Thalson watched from the observation booth as the session quickly dissolved into chaos. The human ambassador stood to speak. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her voice was steady and cold. The Corvox Dominion has murdered 847 human citizens without provocation or declaration. We demand immediate sanctions, the arrest of Admiral Jathok and his officers, and reparations of 5 trillion credits. The Corvox. Representative, a dignified older male named Corvoth, remained calm. We regret the loss of life, but our actions were justified. Human economic aggression left us no choice. We demand the Concordat recognize our right to defend our economic interests. Several species actually agreed with the Corvox. The Jakara. Representative called it an unfortunate but understandable response to human overreach. The Pelian ambassador suggested both sides shared blame. Thalson couldn't believe what she was hearing. The non-aggression mandate existed for exactly this reason. Once species started making excuses for breaking it, the entire peace would collapse. The human ambassador listened to 2 hours of debate. Different species argued about who was really at fault. Some called for sanctions against the Corvox. Others suggested sanctioning humanity for economic disruption. Still others wanted to form committees to study the issue. Finally, the human ambassador stood again. The chamber fell quiet. "We came to the Galactic Concordat believing in your laws," she said. Her voice was soft, but somehow it carried to every corner of the massive hall. "We believed the non-aggression mandate meant something. We believed that civilized species didn't murder each other's civilians over trade disputes." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We were wrong. The Concordat is not civilization. It's just a club where the powerful do as they please, and the weak hope for mercy. We have no interest in being weak." She gathered her documents. "Earth is withdrawing from all Concordat proceedings. We are recalling our ambassadors and our observers. The Corvox Dominion has 3 standard cycles to surrender the officers responsible for this attack and pay the families of the dead. 3 days. After that, we will take what we are owed." With that, the human ambassador walked out. The chamber erupted into confused shouting. Thalson felt a chill run through her body. She had studied human history as part of her analysis. She knew what humans did when diplomacy failed. Their history was full of wars, terrible, devastating wars. Wars that consumed entire continents. Wars where millions died. She pulled up her report on human military doctrine and began reading again. This time, certain phrases jumped out at her. Total war. Scorched earth. Mutually assured destruction. These weren't just military terms. They were concepts. Ways of thinking about conflict that didn't exist in galactic warfare. When Concordat species fought, they had rules. Limits. You didn't target civilians. You didn't destroy colonies. You didn't fight to annihilation. Humans had different rules. Or rather, Thalson realized with growing horror, humans understood that in real war, there were no rules at all. She needed to warn someone. The Corvox thought they were dealing with a weak species that would back down or accept symbolic punishment from the Concordat. They didn't understand what they had awakened. Thalson opened a priority communication to Director Melthas. "Sir, I need to brief the Council immediately. They don't understand what humanity is capable of." "The Council isn't interested in your theories right now, Thalson," came the reply. "The Corvox have 2,000 warships. Humanity has 300. The mathematics are clear. Either humans will back down or they'll lose quickly." "Sir, you don't understand." "That's enough, Commander. Monitor the situation and file regular reports." Melthas out. The communication ended. Thexila sat alone in her office, watching the display screens. Human ships were already moving. Reservists were being called up. Industrial stations around Earth were shifting production. The 3-day deadline began counting down. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson. Thexila just hoped it wouldn't be too expensive. The news of the attack spread through human space like wildfire. On Earth, crowds gathered in silence outside government buildings. On Mars Colony, workers stopped their shifts to watch the memorial broadcasts. On the orbital stations, crew members stood at attention as the names of the dead were read aloud. 847 names. It took 3 hours to read them all. Thexila watched the human response from Concordat Station. She had expected anger, riots, demands for immediate revenge. Instead, she saw something that disturbed her much more. Calm, purpose, silent determination. The human military didn't rush. They followed their procedures exactly. Reserve forces reported to their bases. Factory stations received new production orders and began retooling. Supply chains were reorganized. Everything moved like a machine switching on, smooth and efficient. She received permission to visit Earth to observe their mobilization. The Concordat Council wanted regular reports on human military movements. They still didn't seem worried. Most species were betting that humans would make threats but eventually accept some kind of negotiated settlement. Thexila landed at the military base in Colorado, North America. A young human officer named Lieutenant Chen met her at the landing pad. "Commander Thexila, welcome to Earth. I'll be your liaison during your visit." Lieutenant Chen was professional and courteous. She showed no sign of anger or stress. Thexila found this more disturbing than if the human had been emotional. "Lieutenant, I'm sorry for your losses," Thexila said carefully. "Thank you." "Commander." Lieutenant Chen's face remained neutral. "If you'll follow me, Admiral Kowalski is ready to meet with you." The military base was busy but orderly. Soldiers moved with purpose. Equipment was being loaded onto transport vehicles. But nobody was running. Nobody was shouting. It reminded Thexila of watching a surgeon prepare for a difficult operation. Serious work that required concentration. Admiral Kowalski was a gray-haired human woman with steady eyes. Her office walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays. "Commander Thexila, thank you for coming. I understand you're here to observe our military preparations." "Yes, Admiral. The Concordat Council wants to understand your intentions." Admiral Kowalski nodded slowly. "Our intentions are simple. We're going to war." Thexila shifted uncomfortably. "Admiral, with respect, the Corvox Dominion has 2,000 warships. You have 300. Perhaps if you waited for the Concordat to impose sanctions." "The Concordat has had 3 days to impose sanctions," Admiral Kowalski interrupted. "Instead, they're debating who's really at fault. Meanwhile, Admiral Jothok is giving speeches about teaching us our place." She leaned forward. "Commander, let me be clear. We didn't want this. We came to the galaxy hoping things were different out here, hoping that intelligent species had moved beyond solving disputes with violence." "We have," Thexila protested. "The Concordat has maintained peace for 2,000 years. You've maintained the appearance of peace," Admiral Kowalski corrected, "because nobody has seriously challenged the powerful species. The Corvox broke your most important rule, and half the council thinks they were justified. That's not peace. That's just the strong bullying the weak while everyone else looks away." Thexila had no response to that. "We built our fleet hoping we'd never need to use it properly," the Admiral continued. "We hoped the galaxy was civilized. Now we know it's not. So we're going to teach everyone a lesson that should have been taught a long time ago. Attack our people and the cost will be more than you can afford to pay." Over the next 2 days, Thexila interviewed dozens of human military personnel, pilots, engineers, tacticians, Marines. She asked them all the same questions. Weren't they afraid? Did they understand the odds they were facing? Their answers were remarkably similar. A fighter pilot told her, "I have a job to do." "Fear doesn't change that." A Marine sergeant said, "Those were our people the Corvox killed. What else matters?" But it was a conversation with a civilian that truly shook Thexila. She met an elderly man named Mr. Harrison outside the base. He was there to say goodbye to his grandson, who was shipping out with the fleet. "Aren't you afraid for him?" Thexila asked. Mr. Harrison looked at her with sad eyes. "Of course I'm afraid. But fear doesn't matter. What matters is that those Corvox bastards need to learn that you don't kill humans and walk away, even if it costs more human lives." Especially then, Mr. Harrison replied. Because if we let this go, if we accept some weak apology and worthless credits, then every species in the galaxy will know they can kill us whenever it's convenient. My grandson might survive this war and die in the next one because we didn't make the cost high enough this time. Thexila realized she was seeing something fundamental about humanity. They understood that short-term peace through surrender created long-term danger. Better to fight one terrible war and establish consequences than to face endless smaller attacks. She spent her evenings in her quarters, reading human history files. The more she read, the more disturbed she became. Humans had been fighting wars for their entire existence. Not occasional conflicts like other species, but constant warfare. Tribe against tribe, kingdom against kingdom, nation against nation. Their history textbooks had more chapters about wars than about peace, but it was the scale of human warfare that terrified her. The world wars of their 20th century had killed tens of millions of people. The weapons they developed had grown progressively more devastating. By the end, they had created bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds, and they had used them. Twice. Then something even more disturbing. After creating weapons that could end their entire civilization, humans hadn't stopped fighting. They had developed something called mutually assured destruction. The idea that if war went nuclear, everyone would die so nobody would start one. It had worked. Barely. For decades, humans had lived under the threat of extinction while fighting smaller wars all around their planet. Thexila read military doctrine manuals. One section made her stop breathing. Post-nuclear recovery procedures. It was a detailed plan for rebuilding civilization after a full-scale nuclear war destroyed most of human society. They had actually planned for how to restart farming, manufacturing, and government after 90% of their population was dead. Who does that? What species thinks about how to recover from their own extinction? Humans did, because their history had taught them that survival required planning for the absolute worst-case scenario. On the morning of the third day, Thexila met with Admiral Kowalski one final time. Admiral, I've prepared a report for the Concordat Council. I'm going to recommend they force the Corvox to accept your terms immediately. Will they listen? Probably not, Thexila admitted. Most species think you're bluffing. They think you'll back down when you see the odds. Admiral Kowalski smiled sadly. Then they don't understand us at all. Humans don't bluff about war. We're very serious about it. We've had thousands of years of practice. That's what scares me, Thexila said quietly. The Admiral stood and walked to her window, looking out at the military base. Hundreds of soldiers were boarding transport ships. I'm scared too, Commander. Every person you interviewed these past 3 days is terrified. But we learned something important in our history. Being scared is acceptable. Backing down when your people need you is not. The 3-day deadline expired at 1400 hours Earth Standard Time. Admiral Jathok held a press conference, broadcast across the Concordat. He stood proud and defiant. The humans think they can threaten the Corvox dominion? Let them come. We will crush their pathetic fleet and show the galaxy what happens to species that forget their place. 6 hours later, every human military vessel jumped into hyperspace simultaneously. 300 ships, destination, Corvox space. Thexila returned to Concordat Station and filed her report. It was 40 pages long, filled with analysis and historical data. Her conclusion was stark. Humanity is about to demonstrate military capabilities that the Concordat has never encountered. They fight wars differently than us. They accept costs we cannot imagine. They plan for scenarios we consider impossible. If the Corvox Dominion doesn't surrender immediately, this will not be a war. It will be an extinction event. Director Melthus read her report and filed it away. The Concordat Council was too busy arguing about trade regulations to care about one analyst's warnings. On her observation screen, Thexila watched the human fleet's trajectory. They were heading directly for Thalson, a major Corvox border system defended by 600 warships. The humans were outnumbered 2-1. By every tactical analysis, they should retreat or be destroyed. Thexila had a terrible feeling that tactical analysis was about to become meaningless. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Thalson system at 600 hours. 300 vessels against 600 Corvox defenders. The entire galaxy was watching through sensor feeds and communication relays. On Concordat Station, Thexila stood in the observation center with 50 other analysts. The tactical display showed both fleets clearly. The Corvox ships were already moving into formation, a standard defensive sphere around the massive shipyard that orbited Thalson Prime. "They're really doing it," someone whispered. "The humans are actually attacking." Director Meltas watched the display with his usual calm expression. "This will be over quickly. The humans will lose perhaps 50 ships and then retreat. A bloody nose to satisfy their pride, then negotiations can begin." Thexila said nothing. She had learned to recognize the feeling in her stomach. It was the same feeling she got when reviewing human military history. The sense that something terrible was about to happen. The Corvox fleet commander opened a communication channel. His image appeared on screens across the galaxy. "Human vessels, you are trespassing in Corvox space. Retreat immediately or be destroyed. This is your only warning." The human response came from Admiral Chen, commanding the Earth Defense Fleet carrier Indomitable. "Corvox fleet, you murdered 847 human citizens. We are here to collect what you owe. Surrender Admiral Jathok and his officers or we will take them." The Corvox commander actually laughed. "You come with 300 ships against our 600 and make demands? Humans truly are as stupid as Admiral Jathok claimed." "Then let's find out," Admiral Chen replied calmly. The human fleet split into 3 groups and accelerated toward the Corvox defensive sphere. Every military analyst watching recognized the formation. It was a standard assault pattern, taught at every academy in the galaxy. But then the humans did something strange. The middle group, about 80 ships, suddenly changed course. Instead of attacking the defensive line, they dove beneath the orbital plane and began a high-speed run directly toward the shipyard. "What are they doing?" someone asked. "That's suicide. They'll be caught in crossfire from above and below." The Corvox fleet repositioned to intercept, exactly as the humans had expected. The 2 outer human groups suddenly accelerated, slamming into the Corvox defensive line at points that were now weakly defended. Thexila watched in horror as the battle began. Human ships fought like nothing she had ever seen. They didn't try to dodge or maintain formation. They charged straight into the Corvox lines, accepting devastating hits to their shields and armor. A human destroyer took direct hits from 3 Corvox cruisers. Its shields collapsed, armor plating vaporized, but the ship kept coming, all weapons firing. It rammed the nearest Corvox cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. "They're ramming," Melthas said in disbelief. "They're deliberately ramming enemy vessels, not all of them." But enough. Human captains calculated their ship's remaining combat effectiveness in seconds. If they were too damaged to continue fighting effectively, they stopped being careful. They became weapons themselves. The middle group reached the shipyard. Corvox defense platforms opened fire, destroying 12 human ships in the first salvo. The remaining vessels scattered and began targeting construction bays, dry docks, and supply depots. A human frigate, burning and venting atmosphere, crashed into a construction bay at full speed. The bay collapsed, destroying 2 half-built Corvox warships. The frigate captain broadcast a final message. "Target neutralized." Good luck to the fleet. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the tactical display told a brutal story. Corvox losses: 300 ships destroyed or too damaged to fight. The shipyard was a burning wreck, useless for years. Human losses: 89 ships destroyed. Another 47 damaged but still operational. The Corvox had won. Technically, they still had 300 combat-ready ships in the system. The humans were retreating, but nobody in the observation center cheered. They all understood what they had just witnessed. 3-1, Thexila said quietly. The humans traded at nearly 3-1 against a superior force. And they destroyed the shipyard, another analyst added. That facility produced 40 ships per year. The Corvox just lost a decade of production capacity. Director Melthas looked troubled. "This isn't how wars are fought. You don't trade your forces at those rates. You can't sustain those losses." "Humans can," Thexila replied. "Because they're not trying to win battles. They're trying to make the war so expensive that the Corvox can't afford to continue it." The Corvox were celebrating their victory. Admiral Jathok gave another speech about crushing the human invaders. But Thexila noticed that his voice lacked the confidence from before. The surviving human fleet didn't return to Earth. Instead, they jumped to another Corvox system, Veltara, 6 light-years away. They emerged near a major communication hub and 3 orbital defense platforms. This time there were only 200 Corvox defenders. They expected another pitched battle. Instead, the humans attacked the platforms and the communication hub, ignored the defending fleet, and jumped away within 30 minutes. They lost 12 ships. They destroyed critical infrastructure worth billions of credits. Then they jumped again, and again. Over the next week, the human fleet hit 6 different Corvox systems. They never stayed to fight a prolonged battle. They struck infrastructure, accepted losses, and moved on. Communication arrays, power stations, fuel depots, sensor networks, the pattern became clear. Humans weren't fighting a conventional war. They were fighting a war of economic destruction. Every target they hit was something the Corvox needed to maintain their military. And humans were willing to trade their ships to destroy those targets. On Concordat Station, emergency council sessions ran day and night. Species representatives argued about what to do. Some demanded intervention to stop the humans. Others insisted the Corvox brought this on themselves. The Jakara ambassador stood to speak. His species looked like giant insects, and his voice clicked and buzzed. The humans are violating the laws of warfare. They target civilian infrastructure. They use suicide tactics. They must be stopped. The human ambassador, who had returned for this session, rose to respond. We target infrastructure, not civilians. We give evacuation warnings before every strike. As for suicide tactics, she paused. We call it sacrifice. Our people volunteer for these missions. They choose to give their lives to protect humanity from species that think they can murder us without consequence. A Pelian representative spoke next. But the casualties? Your losses are unsustainable. That's for us to decide, the human ambassador replied coldly. We have 3 billion people. We can afford the losses. Can the Corvox afford to lose their entire industrial base? The chamber fell silent. Texila accessed the latest casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. In 8 days of fighting, humans had lost 173 ships, nearly 60% of their fleet. But the Corvox had lost 500 ships and 7 major industrial facilities. Their military production had effectively stopped. Their communication network was in shambles. Supply lines were disrupted and the humans weren't stopping. The remaining 127 human ships were regrouping for another attack. Director Melthas called Texila to his office. I read your report again, he said quietly. The one I filed away. You were right. About all of it. We need to stop this, Texila replied. Before it goes even further. The Corvox won't surrender. Admiral Jathok is calling the humans cowards for not fighting a proper battle. He doesn't understand that the humans are fighting exactly the way they intend to. Texila pulled up a tactical projection. Sir, if this continues for another month, the Corvox Dominion will be crippled. They'll lose their ability to maintain an interstellar civilization. The humans are literally dismantling them piece by piece. And if we try to intervene, Texila had thought about that, then we become the enemy. And we'd better be prepared for the humans to treat us the same way they're treating the Corvox. Melthas looked old and tired. We created the non-aggression mandate to prevent this exact scenario. We never imagined someone would violate it. And we never imagined a species that would respond this way. The humans imagined it, Texila said. They've lived through it dozens of times in their own history. They know exactly what they're doing. That night, Texila reviewed footage from the Thalson battle again. She watched human ships die. She listened to their final transmissions. Professional. Calm. Almost mechanical. One message stood out. A captain whose ship was burning and losing containment around the reactor. This is Captain Martinez of the frigate Valiant. Reactor containment failing, no escape. Remaining crew of 7 have volunteered to stay aboard. We're targeting the command cruiser at coordinates marked. It's been an honor to serve. Tell our families we did our duty. Martinez out. The ship had accelerated directly into a Corvox command cruiser. Both vessels were destroyed instantly. 57 Corvox died. 7 humans died. The humans considered it a good trade. What kind of species does this, Texila wondered. What kind of people face death this calmly for others they'll never meet? She realized she knew the answer. A species that had been doing it for thousands of years. 3 weeks into the war, the situation had become a nightmare for everyone involved. The Corvox Dominion had lost 40% of their fleet and most of their industrial capacity. But humanity's fleet was down to 127 operational ships. By every reasonable calculation, the Corvox should still win through pure numbers. Then humanity changed tactics again. The human fleet appeared over Corval 4, a Corvox colony world with 8 million inhabitants. Defense platforms moved to intercept. Everyone expected another lightning strike at military targets. Instead, the humans broadcast a message on all frequencies. Attention residents of Corval 4. You have 12 hours to evacuate the following facilities. The transmission included a list of power plants, water treatment centers, food production complexes, and manufacturing facilities. These targets will be destroyed in 12 hours. Evacuation shuttles will not be fired upon. This is your only warning. The galaxy watched in shock as human ships simply waited in orbit. Corvox civilians scrambled to evacuate the listed facilities. True to their word, human vessels held fire as evacuation shuttles launched. Exactly 12 hours later, human ships opened fire. Precision strikes turned the listed facilities into rubble. Not one shot hit a residential area, not one civilian casualty, but Corval 4 could no longer support its population. 8 million Corvox needed to be relocated. The human fleet jumped away before the Corvox military could respond. The same pattern repeated at 3 more colony worlds over the next week. The Galactic Concordat exploded into crisis. Emergency sessions ran continuously. Species representatives shouted at each other. Some called for military intervention against humanity. Others argued the Corvox deserved what they were getting. The human ambassador appeared via HoloLink. She looked tired but determined. The Concordat chairman, a Vryn elder named Thexvoran, spoke first. Ambassador, your actions constitute war crimes under Concordat law. You are deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure. We are targeting the economic capability of the Corvox Dominion to wage war, she replied. We are not targeting civilians. We give them time to evacuate. We verify evacuation is complete before firing. 0 civilian casualties. But you're making their worlds uninhabitable. Temporarily, the ambassador corrected. Those facilities can be rebuilt. The people we evacuated are alive. Compare that to the 847 humans the Corvox murdered without warning. No evacuation, no mercy, just death. A Corvox representative stood shaking with rage. You are barbaric. Uncivilized. You fight without honor. The human ambassador's expression hardened. Honor? You want to discuss honor? Your Admiral Jothok ambushed civilian cargo ships. He killed people who couldn't fight back. He bragged about it. And half this council made excuses for him. She leaned forward. We are not barbaric. We're just better at war than you are. Your entire civilization has forgotten what real war looks like, because the Concordat has protected you for 2,000 years. We're teaching you. Thexila watched from the observation booth. She had been watching humans carefully for weeks now. She understood something the council didn't. Humans weren't angry anymore. They were past anger. They had moved into something colder and more dangerous. Determination, purpose, the absolute certainty that they were right and would see this through to the end. The human ambassador continued. We will accept a ceasefire under these terms. The Corvox Dominion is expelled from the Concordat. Their military is reduced to system defense forces only. Every officer involved in the original attack is turned over for trial, and the families of our dead receive compensation. Unacceptable, the Corvox representative shouted. You cannot dictate terms to us. Then we continue, the ambassador replied simply. And understand this. If these terms are not accepted within 48 hours, we will render every Corvox colony world uninhabitable. Not by killing civilians. We'll evacuate them first. But we will ensure the Corvox Dominion cannot sustain an interstellar civilization. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species representatives shouted over each other. Some demanded the Corvox accept the terms. Others called the humans bluff. But Thexila knew it wasn't a bluff. She had spent weeks studying humanity. They were completely serious. The human ambassador disconnected. The council session dissolved into angry arguments. Thexila received an unusual request. The human ambassador wanted to meet with her privately. They arranged to meet in a neutral section of the station. The ambassador looked exhausted up close. Her name was Ambassador Wei, and she had clearly not slept properly in days. Commander Thexila, I've read your reports on human military capabilities. You're one of the few people in the Concordat who actually understands us. I'm trying to, Thalson replied. But I still have questions. Why are you doing this? You've lost so much already. Why not accept a negotiated peace? Ambassador Wei sat down heavily. Because negotiated peace means nothing if there are no consequences for breaking it. The Corvox attacked us because they thought they could get away with it. The Concordat would make some angry statements, maybe some economic sanctions, and life would go on. Sanctions would have hurt them. Not enough, Wei replied firmly. If we accept that outcome, then in 10 years or 20 years, another species will attack our ships. Because the cost of aggression would be too low, we'd be establishing ourselves as acceptable victims. Thalson considered this. It made a brutal kind of sense. So you're willing to destroy yourselves to prove a point? We're willing to pay whatever price necessary to ensure our survival long-term, Wei corrected. Yes, we're losing ships and people. Yes, it hurts. But do you know what would hurt more? Watching our children die in future wars because we taught the galaxy that humans were easy targets. The ambassador pulled up data on her tablet. Commander, I need you to understand something about humanity. This isn't the first time we've faced extinction. On Earth we came close several times. Nuclear war. Environmental collapse, pandemics, we survived because we made hard choices. Because we accepted terrible costs to secure better futures. She showed Thalson footage from human history, wars, disasters, moments where humanity stood on the edge of destruction and somehow pulled back. Every species in the Concordat has been spacefaring for so long that you've forgotten what real survival pressure feels like. You have rules and protocols and civilized behavior. That's wonderful. We wanted that too. But when push comes to shove, when someone threatens our existence, we remember what we really are. What are you? Thalson asked quietly. Survivors, Wei replied. We're the species that refused to go extinct even when the odds said we should. We're the species that looked at nuclear annihilation and decided to build plans for how to restart civilization afterward. We're the species that practices fighting wars of extinction because our history taught us that extinction is always possible. Thalson felt cold. The Concordat is terrified of you. Good, Wei said without hesitation. Maybe terror will succeed where rules failed. Maybe species will think twice before attacking others if they're truly afraid of the consequences. After the meeting, Thalson returned to her office. She had been given access to Earth's military archives as part of her analysis role. She spent hours reading documents she had skipped before. One file was titled, Post-Apocalyptic Recovery Procedures. It was a manual for rebuilding human civilization after a full-scale nuclear war. It assumed 90% casualties. It included detailed instructions for establishing emergency governments, securing food and water, treating radiation sickness, and preserving knowledge. Another file was labeled Total War Doctrine. It explained the concept of warfare where no distinction existed between military and civilian resources. Everything became a legitimate target because everything supported the war effort. A third file made her stop breathing. Strategic Species Extinction Protocols. It was theoretical. It had never been used. But humans had actually thought about how to drive an enemy species to complete extinction if necessary. She realized something horrifying. Humanity wasn't fighting at full capacity. They weren't using their most terrible weapons. They weren't targeting civilians. They weren't using the worst tactics in their arsenal. They were showing restraint. This was humanity being measured and careful. What would happen if they stopped being careful? The 48-hour deadline approached. The Corvox Dominion fractured into factions. Some wanted to surrender. Others, including Admiral Jathok, refused to yield. Thalson watched as human ships positioned themselves over 3 major Corvox colony worlds. Evacuation warnings were broadcast. This time, 40 million Corvox needed to be relocated. The galaxy held its breath. Would the Corvox surrender, or would humanity actually follow through on their threat? Admiral Jathok made his decision. He gathered the remnants of the Corvox fleet, nearly 800 ships, and made a desperate play. If he could strike Earth itself, perhaps he could force the humans to negotiate. The Corvox fleet jumped toward the Sol system, toward humanity's homeworld. When Thalson saw the tactical display, she felt sick. The Corvox were going to attack Earth, and Earth had pulled most of its fleet away for offensive operations. The humans would be defending their homeworld with whatever forces they could muster in time. It wouldn't be enough. The Corvox fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 800 warships against whatever Earth could gather to defend itself. Admiral Jathok stood on the bridge of his flagship, feeling confident for the first time in weeks. "Scan for human vessels," he ordered. "Sir." Detecting 73 human warships in defensive positions around Earth. Multiple orbital defense platforms. Automated defense satellites. Jathok smiled, showing all his sharp teeth. 73 ships. "We have them outnumbered more than 10 to 1. Today we remind the humans of their place." On Concordat Station, Thexila watched the tactical display with horror. Earth had managed to recall only 73 vessels in time. The rest of the human fleet was scattered across Corvox space, too far away to return before the battle ended. Director Melthos stood beside her. "This is a disaster. Earth will fall." But Thexila wasn't so sure. She had learned something about humans over the past month. They were most dangerous when defending something they cared about. And nothing mattered more to humans than their homeworld. The Corvox fleet advanced into the system. They passed Mars, then the asteroid belt. Human defense satellites opened fire, destroying dozens of the automated platforms. But satellites couldn't stop 800 warships. The human fleet moved to intercept. 73 ships forming a defensive line between the Corvox and Earth. Admiral Chen commanded the defense from the carrier Indomitable. Her transmission was broadcast across all channels. "Corvox fleet, you are attacking our homeworld. Every human in the system is now authorized to use any means necessary to stop you. Turn back now or we will destroy you all." Admiral Jathok laughed. "With 73 ships? You cannot stop us, human. Today your world burns. Then we'll burn together," Admiral Chen replied calmly. The battle began. Human ships charged directly into the Corvox formation. No fancy tactics. No clever maneuvers. Just straight-ahead attacks with every weapon firing. Orbital defense platforms added their firepower, creating overlapping fields of fire. But the numbers were overwhelming. Corvox ships surrounded human vessels, hitting them from multiple angles. Within the first hour, 20 human ships were destroyed. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle happening above their world. In cities around the planet, people gathered in streets, in homes, and shelters. They watched their defenders die protecting them. Thexila watched the tactical display, tears streaming down her face. This was slaughter. The humans were fighting brilliantly, but mathematics was mathematics. They couldn't win. Then something changed. The human ships stopped trying to survive. Every captain made the same decision. If their ship was too damaged to fight effectively, they turned it into a weapon. Reactors were set to overload. Courses were plotted toward enemy vessels. Crews evacuated to escape pods when possible. When not possible, they stayed aboard. A human destroyer, burning and venting atmosphere, rammed in Corvox cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a massive fireball. A frigate with a failing reactor deliberately flew into the center of a Corvox formation before detonating. 6 Corvox ships were caught in the blast. The carrier Indomitable took catastrophic damage from multiple Corvox battleships. Admiral Chen gave one final order. All hands abandon ship. Set collision course for enemy flagship. It's been an honor serving with you all. The massive carrier, its hull torn open and trailing debris, accelerated toward Admiral Jathok's flagship. Point defense systems tried to stop it, but the carrier was too large, moving too fast. It crashed into the flagship's starboard side, and both vessels exploded in a blast that could be seen from Earth's surface. Admiral Jathok died, never understanding what he had awakened. The battle raged for 6 hours. The longest, bloodiest 6 hours in modern galactic history. The Corvox fleet pushed through the human defensive line, taking horrific casualties with every meter gained. Human ships sold themselves as expensively as possible. Orbital defense platforms fought until they were destroyed. Automated satellites rammed Corvox vessels when they ran out of ammunition. Even civilian ships from Mars and the asteroid colonies joined the fight. Their crews knowing they wouldn't survive but buying time for Earth's evacuation centers to fill. On Earth, the space elevators ran continuously, bringing people down to underground shelters. Nobody knew if the shelters would matter if the Corvox started orbital bombardment, but humans prepared anyway, always planning for the worst. In orbit, the last human warship still fighting was the destroyer Resolution. Her crew of 212 had been reduced to 17 survivors. Her weapons were offline. Her engines were failing. But she kept fighting. ramming smaller Corvox vessels using her remaining maneuvering thrusters to position for one last strike. Captain Rodriguez, the ship's commander, broadcast a final message. "This is Resolution. We're going for the command cruiser at Mark 7-3. Tell Earth we did our duty. Tell our families we love them." Resolution out. The destroyer's reactor went critical. She accelerated toward a Corvox command cruiser and detonated. The explosion took out the cruiser and 2 nearby frigates. The Sol system fell silent. All 73 human defenders were gone. 58 destroyed completely. 15 damaged beyond recovery, their crews either dead or captured, but the Corvox fleet was shattered. Of the 800 ships that entered the system, only 237 remained combat effective. The rest were destroyed or so badly damaged they couldn't fight. The surviving Corvox commander looked at the tactical display in shock. They had lost 563 ships, over 70% casualties. To destroy 73 defenders, on Earth orbital defense platforms were gone. The fleet was destroyed. Nearly 1 million humans had died in the defense, military and civilian. The planet was defenseless, but the Corvox fleet was in no condition to press the attack. Ships were damaged. Crews were exhausted and traumatized. They had never seen anyone fight like the humans fought. They had never faced an enemy willing to turn every ship into a weapon. The surviving Corvox commander made a decision. He ordered the fleet to withdraw. As the Corvox vessels limped out of the Sol system, something unexpected happened. The rest of the human fleet scattered across Corvox space received word of the battle. 127 ships immediately abandoned their positions and jumped toward Corvox Prime, the Dominion's homeworld. They arrived to find minimal defenses. Most of the Corvox military had died in the Sol system or in previous battles. The human fleet surrounded Corvox Prime and broadcast a simple message: "Surrender now, or we start firing on your homeworld." On Corvox Prime, the civilian government had watched the Battle of Earth. They had seen 800 warships reduced to 237. They had seen humans fight with a ferocity that defied comprehension. They understood that if they didn't surrender, the humans would actually bombard their homeworld, and nobody would stop them. The Galactic Concordat couldn't intervene fast enough. No ally would risk facing human wrath. The Corvox government surrendered unconditionally. The war was over. The aftermath was grim. Humanity had started with 300 ships. They ended with 69 operational vessels. The Corvox had lost 80% of their military and most of their industrial capacity. 4.3 million humans were dead. 15 million Corvox had died in the fighting. The Galactic Concordat convened to address the war's end. The Corvox Dominion was expelled from the Concordat. Their military was restricted to system defense forces. Officers involved in the original attack were turned over for trial, but the real change was deeper. The non-aggression mandate was reinforced with automated enforcement systems. Any ship attacking another species' vessels without declaration would be targeted by Concordat defense forces automatically. More importantly, a new understanding spread through the galaxy. Humanity was no longer seen as a minor species. They were seen as the species that had fought the Corvox Dominion to near extinction despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Thexila's report on human military capabilities became required, reading at military academies across the galaxy. Her conclusion was studied carefully. Humans are not the strongest species, nor the smartest, nor the most advanced. But they are the only species that has perfected war to the point where they can destroy civilizations more powerful than themselves, through sheer determination and willingness to accept costs we cannot imagine. They fight as though every battle might be their last, not because they're brave, but because their entire evolutionary history has taught them that survival requires it. 5 years later, Concordat Station hosted a memorial service for all who died in the war. Representatives from both humanity and what remained of the Corvox Dominion attended. Thexila watched as Ambassador Wei laid a wreath at the memorial wall. The ambassador looked older now, gray in her hair, lines on her face from years of stress. After the ceremony, Thexila approached her. "Ambassador Wei, may I ask you something?" "Of course, Commander. Do you regret it? Do humans regret how far the war went?" We was quiet for a long moment. Every day, every single day, we didn't want this. We built our fleet and prayed we'd never need to show the galaxy what humans can do when pushed too far. But the Corvox forced you to. Yes. And now everyone knows.